Tomorrow, the House is scheduled to vote to formalize the impeachment inquiry into President Joe Biden. I mentioned that at the top of the program. Joining us now to discuss this, Florida Congressman Mike Waltz, who is also a member of the Oversight Committee, will be a part of this inquiry. Congressman, welcome back to Washington Watch.
Hey, always good to be with you, Tony.
I appreciate you taking time to join us. I know you've been on the floor in votes. So let's talk about this. Very narrow margins. You're going to have to get almost all of the Republicans on board to advance this. Are you there?
I think so, Tony. You know, it's always tough these days with a 3-vote majority. A lot of different opinions, but I'll remind everyone, and we've been reminding everyone in the conference, this is to further the inquiry. This is to further the investigation. This is not impeachment. And what we have so far, I mean, this is just a snippet of a long list. We have bank records. We can follow the money to show that the Biden family established over 27 shell companies. I don't know any sitting vice president that needs to establish dozens of shell companies, including several in his grandchildren's name. We know he bought a house, $2.5 million in cash. We know there's a series of, quote, loan repayments, although there's no documentation of any loans provided, and that is a key red flag to anti-money laundering investigators for money laundering. We have an FBI form, official form 1023, showing a bribery scheme from Ukraine. We know we have IRS whistleblowers, sitting government employees, that say their investigation to determine if taxes were paid were obstructed and slow down and slow rolled by the Department of Justice under Biden. So I think there is more than enough to say we need additional records, and what this inquiry will do will give us greater standing in court and give us greater standing if there's any dispute with the executive branch to say the American people deserve to know the answers to these questions. And when you hear the Democrats say, okay, fine on Hunter, and by the way, he's just been indicted in California on tax evasion, but there's still no connection to Joe. We know he lied. We know he made phone calls to Hunter's business partners. We know he sent dozens of emails from a fake account. And I think the underlying crime, the high crime and misdemeanor, because this is very serious, unlike the Democrats under Nancy Pelosi, this is a very serious constitutional power. Were taxes paid? We want those records. Did he aid his son in being an agent of a foreign power, unregistered? And was there obstruction of a legitimate investigation from his Department of Justice? Those in and of itself deserve to be investigated, and the American people deserve to know.
So let me ask you this question, Congressman Waltz. Based on what you just presented, and I heard House Speaker Mike Johnson talking about this earlier today, would it not be irresponsible of Congress not to look into this, given what information has come forward?
We absolutely have a responsibility and a duty, and ironically, Tony, I'll remind folks that Bill Clinton was actually at the height of his approval ratings at the end of impeachment because the media painted him as a victim. President Trump was at the height of his approval in February of 2020 because, for different reasons, because there was actually really nothing there. But the point is, this actually, with the media stacked against us, this could actually work against us politically. The Democrats are saying all about politics. This is actually, there is so much information here. This is about substance, and this is about corruption at the highest levels and an influence scheme, not from countries like, I don't know, New Zealand or Austria, from countries that are our listed adversaries, from the Chinese Communist Party,
right,
from Russia, from corrupt elements of Ukraine that we have Joe Biden on record bragging about. So we're going to get to the bottom of it regardless of the politics, and you're absolutely right, and Speaker Johnson's right. We have a duty to do so.
One final question on this topic, Congressman Waltz. Just to be very clear, as you've pursued this information thus far, you've had the Department of Justice and others that have actually blocked and stonewalled this investigation, have they not?
Well, for example, we would have never known that there were 180 suspicious activity reports on Hunter Biden and the Biden family. Remember, and we're just on the tip of the iceberg on Joe Biden's brother, Jim. 180 of them. We would have never known. Once we found out they were there, the Treasury Department still won't hand them over. We've seen them, but they won't hand them over. It's things like that. It's the president's tax returns. Did he declare these monies? Did he pay taxes? Did he pay taxes on the $5 million that we have a sworn known FBI informant said he received? And did he change policy as a result, which would be bribery? It's explicitly listed in the Constitution. So there are a lot of records that we've been after. The administration won't provide them. This inquiry gives us greater constitutional and legal standing to get them when they're disputed in court.
Well, we're going to be watching that vote very, very closely tomorrow. I want to switch topics here for just a moment. Congressman Mike Waltz, Friday, the United States vetoed a resolution in the UN Security Council demanding an Israeli ceasefire. Now, Arab and Islamic nations called for an emergency session of the General Assembly this afternoon, and there was a vote on a resolution making the same demand. Now, it's a non-binding resolution, but what's the goal here? It's a non-binding resolution, but what is this, an effort to try to isolate Israel from the rest of the world?
Well, that's exactly right. And first, Tony, look, I want to give credit where credit's due on the administration vetoing this anti-Israel, anti-Semitic move in the UN. And again, give credit where credit's due. The administration made the right stand. But yes, this is the UN showing its true colors. They do this often. It's a bit more nefarious through things, like the UN education and other things that are a little more sly in their in their anti-Semitism. But this is on full display. And look at the list of countries in Europe that either abstained or actually voted for this ceasefire, which absolutely 100% would be a win for Hamas. This is what they want. They want to be able to get away with their atrocities and then galvanize world opinion against Israel. It's playing right into the terrorists and Iran's hands. And this is why you've seen House Republicans repeatedly vote to defund the UN. Enough is enough, whether it's our tax dollars going to poison Ivy League colleges or whether it's going to the UN. We've got to make a stand. And the last thing we should do is be funding it.
Well, let me ask you about that, Congressman. Will this provide greater impetus for the defunding and pulling the United States out of the UN?
Well, I would hope many of the Democrats that are standing strong with Israel and standing with our Jewish Americans and Jewish people around the world and against terrorism would kind of see the light here in what's going on and start voting with us when we're calling out this blatant anti-Semitism in the UN.
One final question on this topic, Congressman Mike Waltz. You and I have had many conversations about foreign affairs and foreign policy. This is quite significant, this development that is taking place, because as we've seen this, you made reference to the anti-Semitism that has been seen in our own country in Europe. This is almost unprecedented in modern times of what we're seeing. What does this say going forward? I mean, this is almost a shifting of the geopolitical landscape in the world.
Well, if you look closely on the votes here, you see more narrowly in Europe, you see Eastern Europe, which is actually many of those countries are contributing their fair share in the fight against Russia, have stood with the United States, and voted against this ceasefire. And then you see kind of the old Europe, the Frances and Italy's and others that either abstained or actually voted for the ceasefire. So I think you're seeing that schism. But I would, Tony, I would almost say this is in biblical terms.
Yeah.
This is a shift that many of us have always feared, and this is truly a global and existential fight of good against evil. And what's so scary and should scare everyone is how the minds of our next generation, of our young people, are getting poisoned in our educational institutions. And to me, that's where the fight truly is. And that's where we as conservatives have got to stop complaining and making more progress.
I think you're spot on. I agree with you totally.